Welcome to the Dr. Wyatt Show, where developing a long-lasting, happy relationship is the status symbol to achieve, and following my tools is one path to help get you there. I'm your host, Dr. Wyatt Fisher, a licensed psychologist specializing in couples counseling. I had a new review that came in. I always appreciate reviews because when you're doing a podcast, sometimes you wonder, is anybody listening? Is anybody actually paying attention? Is this actually making an impact? And so when you get a review, it just feels really good. It's really fulfilling. It's really rewarding, and it just motivates me to keep going. So I really appreciate the reviews when they come in. So I received a recent review and I'm going to read it. It says, "I'm so grateful to have found this podcast. The 5 secrets to becoming a better partner is so helpful. I have gone back and listened to it at least 3 times and have found something to take away from it each time. I can't thank you enough for all your help." Thank you so much. If you're listening right now and you're the one who left that review, I really appreciate you for leaving that review. Again, it's motivating, it's rewarding, and it shows me that this podcast is making an impact. So if you haven't left a review, I highly encourage you to. It does several things. First of all, what I already said, it shows me that this podcast is making an impact, and it tells Apple Podcasts and other podcast platforms that people are liking the podcast, because one of the biggest ranking factors for podcasts is how many reviews they have. So the more reviews a podcast receives, the higher in the ranking it goes, so that more couples can hear it and it can make more of an impact. So if you haven't already left a review, please consider doing so. I would really appreciate it. Be sure to call me with your marriage questions. You can reach me at 303-578-0618. Leave a voicemail, and then I'll respond back to your question on the next podcast episode. So today I'm going to share a voicemail I received on that number, and then I'm going to respond back to the voicemail.
Hi, Dr. Wyatt. Thank you for taking my call. My husband and I have been married for almost 15 years, and we have 3 children, 13, 10, and 16 months old. My mother has lived on and off over the course of our marriage, about half of our marriage, about 8 years, 7 or 8 years. I don't necessarily have the best relationship with my mother, and it's been challenging because I tend to tell her a little bit and not really stand up to my mom. She has not more of a controlling personality, so I tend to not really take authority in my household, and that's been a big challenge for my husband. Just observing that and feeling like we have to step in. As a result, it's impacted our intimacy on many different levels. We don't look like we have the freedom and flexibility to really support one another. And so this is a long-term living arrangement because my mom is ill and has some financial challenges. So we've grown resentful towards each other for various reasons. Me, because he has not advancing in his career as he was doing some, and because he doesn't feel like I'm affectionate enough towards him. So we talked about, or he brought up divorce some years ago, but we went through counseling and agreed that wasn't a route that he wanted to pursue. As of lately, though, I've been having some challenges and have been kind of entertaining that idea because I am the breadwinner, so like I have to support my house a lot because it doesn't seem motivated. So I'm just hoping for some direction and just wanting to hopefully get some advice. I'm hoping you can go out and just help me on maybe things that we can take. Neither of us want divorce for a variety of reasons. Based things, and also because of our children, just not wanting to replicate patterns from our history and our family. But we want to make it work. We're just really having a difficult time connecting, and it seems like it's been the most difficult over the course of the year. So any advice and recommendations you have would be great. Thank you again. Bye.
Okay. So a couple thoughts on what this lady is saying. First of all, it's really normal when you're struggling in your marriage to start thinking about divorce. Divorce is everywhere. We've become so desensitized to it. The average movie star, I think, gets divorced around 7 times, I've read. And because it's everywhere, we consider divorce much more than our ancestors ever did, because back in those days, there was social pressure to stay together and to work it out. But today, there's not. And we've become numb, we've become desensitized. And as a result, we're all guilty of thinking of divorce much more readily than our ancestors ever did. So it's very common, it's very normal. So, first of all, it's good to hear that you and your partner don't want to get a divorce. You want to work on the marriage. It doesn't sound like there's any, abuse or infidelity or chronic neglect necessarily happening. Sounds like obviously there's some neglect going on with, affection and then problems with finances. But it doesn't sound like there's any glaring red flags where I would recommend you definitely need to get a separation here. What I would highly recommend is getting your mother out of the house, if possible, because it's rare to have an in-law live with you and to have it not impact your marriage negatively. Most of the time, when you have in-laws live with you, it's going to create problems because those in-laws can meddle and they can interfere with your parenting. They can interfere with your marriage. They're constantly there. You don't have privacy anymore. They can be difficult. They can cause fights. Obviously, this is going to depend on your in-laws. And so the better they are with their emotional intelligence, the less of a negative impact it may have on you as a couple. But even if they're highly emotional intelligent, it's still going to have an impact because the house is no longer yours. You have this third party always there. So, if possible, the first thing I would recommend is get your mother out of your house. Do whatever it takes. Try to find affordable housing. Try to find anything that is for lower income individuals that can also tend to her in her illness. Because it sounds like if your mother is dying, but that's killing your marriage. So don't let your mother kill your marriage. And it can be difficult. So if you're more passive and your mom's more dominant, then that does put your husband in an awkward position to become more assertive and to draw the line or create boundaries. And I can relate to this because this is very similar to the dynamic we've had with my mother-in-law. She can be very domineering, very difficult, and my wife has struggled being passive and just deferring to her mother. And so when her mother would come to visit, it would constantly create friction and tension in the house. And so I can even personally relate with what you're describing and how challenging, how difficult it is. I can't even imagine if my mother-in-law lived with us. It would be very, very difficult. So I feel for both of you because it can be very taxing to have an in-law live in your house. So that'd be my first step of recommendation is get her out of the house, do whatever it takes, be creative. And if it's a financial issue, think it through. If you get a divorce, that's going to wipe out half of all your assets. So I would imagine getting your mom out of the house wouldn't cost as much as getting a divorce is going to cost you. So that'd be my first level of recommendation. Second thing is to explore the block with your husband and with you. So what's his block with not being more ambitious? Sounds like he had made some commitments to you. He made some promises with finances and his career, and he's not following through. So it would be helpful if you haven't already, not to attack, not to criticize, but to unpack, to process, to explore. What's going on there? Maybe he's tried some things and they didn't work out like he thought. Or maybe he's having a change of heart. He thought he wanted to go down one path, but now he's not so sure. Maybe he's resentful with your mother being there, and so he's lost his drive to fulfill his obligation. Those things don't justify it or make it right. But just understanding the why, understanding the cause with his complacency around his career would be an important first step because then that will give you information on what to do about it. Where do we go from here? The next thing to explore is your lack of affection toward him. I'm assuming it's because of all the tension in the house with your mother being there. I'm sure that's a turnoff for you. And if he's not fulfilling his commitments with his career, that probably is creating some resentment toward you. And therefore, you're feeling blocked physically, which really makes sense. That's what happens. When we're blocked emotionally, we become blocked physically. So I would also discuss that with him and help connect those dots. Maybe you've talked about this, maybe you haven't, but a lot of people need to see the dots connected where they need to understand that if they're doing a certain behavior that is hard on their partner, it's demotivating their partner to want to become physically intimate with them. So he may not connect those dots, and this may not be the connection, but it sounds like it is that the less he fulfills his obligation to the family financially, the less open you are to him sexually. And he may not have put those two things together, but if you can spell it out for him clearly, that may be a game changer. At the end of the day, there's always these standoffs, and couples feel like, well, should I take the first step or should they take the first step? I'm not going to do anything because they're not doing anything. So, one thing I would encourage you with is be the initiator, take that first step, take care of your side of the equation. So, if your block is the affection, the physical side, work on it. Take some steps, some micro steps, so that he can't throw that back in your face saying you're not doing your side, because then the spotlight will be left on him for not fulfilling his side. And I highly recommend that. That's a common trap that couples get into. Well, they're not meeting my needs, so why should I meet their needs? If you are in that trap, or if anyone else is in that trap, I always encourage you, do your part, own your part, and work on you. That's all you can control. Become a better version of you, become a better partner, because then your spouse cannot point the finger at you anymore for being the cause of their behavior. Now, the finger is only at them. The spotlight is left on them as the partner who hasn't made the changes yet. And when you make those changes yourself, that's going to motivate them to make changes. So I would also recommend that. And if you guys aren't already working with a coach or a counselor, I also would recommend that, because when you get in a stalemate and you're gridlocked, if you and your partner are at an impasse, it shows you need an outside party to help you through it and to help you navigate. Sounds like you went to a counselor in the past and it helped because you avoided divorce. So I would recommend going back to that counselor. You can contact me if you want counseling services. You can go to my website, click on coaching, and work with one of my master coaches who are excellent. But get some help, get some support, because it sounds like you're getting pretty desperate and you're feeling pretty low, and that's the danger zone. And I'm sure your husband is feeling the same. So don't delay. A lot of couples wait years after problems begin before they really start reaching out for help. But the common denominator here sounds like your mother. Sounds like when she moved in before, it was a problem. Then she moved out for a while, things got better. Then she moved back in, and there's more problems. So that's why, again, I go back to my first recommendation, which is get her out of the house, do whatever it takes. And you don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to be confrontational about it. You're setting a boundary to protect your marriage, to protect your family. So if your mom is a source cause of problems in your house, you need to get her out of there. But you can do it with tact. You can do it with respect. You can do it kindly, but you're setting a boundary, because having her in the house is damaging your relationships and your family. Okay, another question that came through, someone submitted this question. I prefer getting the questions through voicemail because then it's just easier, and then I can play the voicemail on the podcast. So again, make sure you give me a call, 303-578-0618. Leave a voicemail. I'll address your question on the next podcast episode. But here's another question that came in. It says, I struggle hearing constructive feedback when my partner gets the facts wrong. What should I do? This happens a lot, especially for people who are more left-brained. They're more logical, and they get caught in the weeds. So their partner is giving them constructive feedback. Maybe they're doing the bullseye question, or they're doing the reunite tool, and they're hearing a resentment. Their partner is giving them feedback, but they can't even hear the feedback because they zero in on how the facts are off. I didn't say that. I said this. That's not the order this happened. It happened in this order. And they start arguing over the facts of what happened. And that's a problem on a couple levels. Okay, first of all, you're never going to talk your partner out of their experience, just like they're not going to talk you out of your experience. So it's a waste of energy to debate the facts, to debate what really happened in a conflict. It really doesn't matter. What matters is the impact your partner had. What matters is the impression they had. What matters is how the conflict made them feel. The facts don't matter. And that may sound counterintuitive, especially if you're a facts-driven person, you're very logical, you're very left-brained. I am. That's how my brain is wired as well. But you're probably married to someone who's more fluid, more organic, and they don't get the facts right all the time. But that doesn't mean you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to still hear what they're saying, even if the facts are out of order, even if the phrasing was incorrect that they're remembering. It doesn't matter. And that's where it takes impulse control. It requires impulse control to listen to your spouse, share their complaint through the bullseye question, and you not correct them. That's why the only thing you're allowed to say in the bullseye is, thank you for the feedback. But then remember, you get to sift through their feedback and you're looking for the kernel of truth. Yes, maybe the facts were a little out of order. Maybe the phrasing was a little off with what they said happened. But I'm not thinking about that. Instead, I'm thinking of what's the main point here that they're trying to make? What's the main thing they're highlighting about me? What's the main impression I gave them? What's the main thing I made them feel? That's what I'm thinking about. I'm not getting in the weeds with the facts of, did this happen? Did that not happen? Is that the order? Is that not the order? It's not about that. So try to zoom out when you're getting feedback. If you struggle getting stuck in the weeds with facts, try to zoom out and really try to listen to the overall essence of what they're trying to say, because that's what really matters. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Wyatt Show. People are lost. Couples are lost. Couples are struggling, and they need hope. If you have found hope from this podcast, please share this episode with one other person. And remember, if you want my free PDF on 4 steps to better communication, check the link in the description. And don't get a better partner. Own your part and become a better partner. Take care.